Hello, today we're going to learn about conditional statements. Conditional statements are an extremely important part of programming that every programmer needs to have under their belt. But first things first, I want to review a couple of the concepts that we talked about in the last video, but before that, we also need to create our environment. So on replit.com again, we need to click the big blue create button and select Python as our environment, and you can title it whatever you want. I'm going to call it conditional statements. And then we want to create the REPL. And basically what we reviewed last time was the three most important data types that we can store in our variables. So those were strings, numbers, and booleans. Just to reiterate, I'm going to create some variables. We could create a variable called name and store Josh in it. We could create a variable called current underscore time and set it equal to 8, or we could set it equal to 4. And then we could create a variable called tired, and we could set it equal to true. And remember, booleans are just variables that are either true or false. And in Python, we have to denote true or false with a capital T or capital F, so that way the program knows that what we're talking about. So now we can talk about conditional statements. Conditional statements are simply statements that ask a question. So in this scenario, we can ask the question, is somebody tired? So the way we would denote that in programming is by saying, if someone is tired, then do this action. So the actual syntax of how to write that is if parentheses, and then you would put your question in here. And our question this time is going to be if tired is equal to true. And in the scenario that it's true, we want to print I am, or we can print go to sleep. So there's a lot going on here, so let's break it down. The first thing is we typed the syntax for the if statement, and that was if parentheses, close parentheses, and then a colon. So this colon tells the computer everything that follows is part of that if statement. So if my question is true, then I want you to execute what's underneath me. So also in Python, the indentation is really important. So the way the computer knows to execute print go to sleep is because it's indented inside of here. So let's review. We said if tired is equal to true, then and only then are we going to execute print go to sleep. You might notice another thing is that I used two equal signs up here. In the last video, we talked about what one equal sign meant, and that meant that we were assigning a value. So on lines 1, 2, and 3, I'm assigning the value of Josh to name, I'm assigning the value of 4 to current time, and I'm assigning the value of true to tired. But on line 5, I'm not assigning the value of true to tired. That's already been done. So on line 5 instead, I'm asking the question, is tired actually equal to true? So in this scenario, to ask that question, we have to use two equal signs. That's how the program knows the difference between assigning and asking the question. So now let's try running this program. And after our console does the update, we can see that the output is going to be go to sleep. So this is really important. The program knew that because tired was equal to true, it printed go to sleep. But let's say it was the opposite. Let's say tired was set equal to false. In this scenario, it's not going to work. So it's going to ask the question, is tired equal to true? And it's going to go and check the value of tired, which happens to be false. And because it's false, the computer is not going to execute what's inside of our if statement. And just a reminder, it knows that it's inside our if statement because it follows the colon and it's indented. So now let's run this. And like we said, nothing is printed into the console. But obviously, these can get a lot more complicated than that. So let's cover a couple more complex scenarios. There's another statement that we can add to this, which is in the scenario where this if statement isn't true. And that's an else statement. So let's create an else statement here. And you need a colon, and then basically you need to indent again. It's the same as the if statement. So let's say we want to print relax. So now let's think about what would happen. Since tired is equal to false, on line 5, this if statement is going to evaluate to false. It's going to ask, is tired equal to false? Or is tired equal to true? It's not equal to true. So we're going to ignore this, and then we're going to go to the else statement. And the else statement basically just says, take everything from before. If the if statement fails, then go to the else statement. So in this scenario, we should print relax, which is true. In the console, we see relax pop up. But there's even more we can sort of add on to this. There's also something called an else if statement. And the way we write that in Python is elif. And so you would need parentheses and then a colon again, and it would need to be indented. But let's think of a question that we could sort of ask here. On line 2, we have that the current time is equal to 4. So maybe we could ask the question, if current underscore time is equal to 4, then we can print work. So just in this sort of imaginary scenario, if a person is tired, we'll tell them to go to sleep. If that's not true, if they are not tired, but the time is equal to 4, then we'll print go to work. And if neither of those things are true, then we'll print relax. So now let's see what sort of happens. If we run this program, we should print go to work. So that's really important to notice, because this first if statement failed, but this else if statement was true. And because this else if statement was true, we ignore the else. So that's sort of the connection you need to make. If any of these statements are true, it's going to ignore everything else. If the first if statement is true, it doesn't look at the else if statement, and it doesn't look at the else. If the else if statement is true, and it won't look at the else. If the else is true, well, there's nothing below that, so there's nothing else to look at. But just to reiterate, let's look at this. Let's set tired equal to true. Let's set tired equal to true. And even though the current time is also 4, the result is only going to be go to sleep. And that's because, like we were saying, if this if statement results to true, then it's going to ignore everything else. So notice how we didn't print go to work there. But now let's try to execute the else statement. To do that, we'd have to have tired set equal to false and the current time set equal to something other than 4. So in this scenario, now we've print relax. So finally, we've seen sort of the basics of Boolean variable usage along with conditional statements. This is going to be sort of a short video. Conditional statements are more complicated than this in the future, or in some sort of aspects of programming. But generally, this is the basics that you need to know. And there are more potential for these. If you want, I would suggest you play around with these sort of and get as much practice as you can. There is also the ability to nest these conditional statements. For example, I could say another if statement inside of the current if statement. So maybe if someone is tired, but also if the current time was equal to 8, then I could print watch TV. And then the way this sort of works is a little bit more complicated. So in order for us to print watch TV, we'd have to have tired be equal to true and the current time would be 8. So in this scenario, we would print go to sleep and we would print watch TV. But if current time was not equal to 8, and let's say it was equal to, actually we could set it equal to 4, it's only going to print go to sleep. It's going to check the if statement on line 7 and it's going to say, is current time equal to 8? It's not, it's equal to 4. But then it just ignores this if statement, and then it ignores the else if, and the else. So if we run this program, it should just say go to sleep. But that's the basics of conditional statements. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Our contact information is in the description, or you can leave a comment below and we'll get back to you.